given that 50 to 60% of the population believes in the paranormal, and something like 30% say they've experienced it, we have some kind of obligation in science to find out why.
It was 70 years ago at Duke University, North Carolina, that attempts to quantify psychic phenomena under controlled conditions began, and they've been plagued with controversy ever since. The science of parapsychology was the brainchild of Joseph Banks Rhine, a biologist with an interest in things spiritual. A visit to the medium Marjorie Crandon had convinced him that the study of psychic phenomena should be brought away from the fakery of the séance room and into the laboratory. But Rhine's first experiments in the field were an embarrassing dead end, investigating the psychic abilities of a performing horse called Lady Wonder.
He concluded that the horse actually was reading minds. It was not an auspicious beginning for him and his program of parapsychology. And it wasn't until the mid-1930s that he got the serious attention of the scientific community again.
Rhine's book, Extrasensory Perception, a term he invented, was based on far more convincing experiments and had an enormous impact.
Oh, Sarah, so nice to see you again. Please, take a seat. Let's buzz through to George and let him know we're ready.
Using ordinary subjects and not self-proclaimed mediums, Rhine tried to amass statistical evidence for the existence of telepathy.
Ready?
Okay, let's begin.
It was in Rhine's laboratory that xenocards were developed, comprising 5 symbols: star, circle, cross, wavy lines, and square.
Cross.
One experimental subject, the sender, would pick a card, and the other, the receiver, who might be in another room, had to try and guess which one it was.
Square.
It was a good clearing up job, but of course what he ended up doing was really, really boring experiments in which people sat hour after hour going square, circle, circle, wavy lines, and getting marginally significant results, which we can now look back at and think, well, you know, there were lots and lots of problems with these, and they did not really provide believable evidence.
Wavy line.
2 of Rhine's subjects, however, achieved far more than marginally significant results. George Zirkle and Sarah Owenby sometimes scored as many as 23 out of 25 correct answers.
Star.
Rhine took this as strong evidence. But in 1938, a conjuring magazine suggested that J.B. Rhine might have been hoodwinked. There are any number of ways that George and Sarah could have been communicating that didn't need ESP. One method involves 2 people practicing counting together at the same speed.
Cross.
As soon as an answer is called out, the accomplices start counting. If the bell rings after 4 beats, a square is being sent.
Square.
Cheating, sometimes by subjects and sometimes by the experimenters, continued to be a problem for parapsychology.
I think parapsychology has a particular problem with fraud, in the sense that all sciences have some fraud, but they can cope with it. A little bit of fraud here and there, which is almost inevitable, doesn't really matter, because in almost any other science you can look for replication. And if somebody else can repeat the result, it doesn't really matter if the first person cheated. And if they can't, well, everybody will realise they can't, and the cheater will be shown up. The problem in parapsychology is that we haven't got good replicable phenomena at all. So it could be that all we have are the little bits of fraud and the little bits of errors and nothing else. In other words, all the phenomena are the noise, if you like, which other sciences can get rid of, and we can't.
A hearty hi there, mutants and weirdos, and welcome to another episode of Mondo Diablo. As you may know, we're not finished with secrets of the psychic yet, so get ready. For some reason, and I think it's because of africangospelchurch.blogspot.com, there's a whole lot of old-timey bluegrass, gospel, and other treats in store. The next song you're going to hear is the introduction to a concert given by the People's Temple Choir. Lots of bright little talented children. Later in the podcast, you'll hear them as the compound is raided. I I can only hope that over in Malaysia, the mutants of Dobbstown could show such fervor and loyalty in Bob. But if it were Bob himself handing out Flavor Aid, I trust that the fine people of Dobbstown will have the backbone to kill Bob, as it says in Scripture.
Said you've got to be attractive to men. Then making the Connies of this world envious is the most important asset a woman can have.
Parapsychologists have been clamoring to be recognized as legitimate science, and they still haven't quite made it. Most of the scientific community still does not accept them.
It may very well be that some of the things that today would seem magical will one day become embraced within science. But the vast majority of things that we would think of as magical never will. The trick is, of course, to find out which they are, and you've got to do true science to do that.
The tape that you're about to see consists of a series of episodes suggestive of psychokinesis. The effects
In pursuit of true science, two scientists from the McDonald Laboratory for Psychical Research investigated two young men who claimed to have psychic powers.
The subjects in these experiments are two men of about 21, ME and SS, addressed on the soundtrack as Mike and Steve.
The scientists did not claim that the tape provided incontrovertible evidence of psychokinesis, or PK, but they still thought that it had much to offer.
The object in front of Steve's hands is a small clock, and he's attempting to move it via PK. Steve had reported success at these kinds of efforts before coming to research sessions, and here you'll see him successfully induce such movements.
Steve's full name is Steve Shaw, though he's now adopted the stage name Banachek, because Steve is not a psychic, he's a conjurer.
The way that I normally make something move is pretty convincing. But this particular time, I simply had a piece of thread, a broken piece of thread, and I had wrapped it around one finger and around the other and made it move forward. And as it moves forward, you see me going like this, but then I want to make it come back towards me. So I lift up over it, and I come back. So to me, it's obvious you have a thread.
But why was Steve trying to fool the scientists? His aim, along with the other so-called psychic Mike Edwards, was to prove how easily magicians can convince scientists that they have paranormal powers. The hoax was orchestrated by magician and arch-skeptic James Randi.
They went into the laboratory over a period of about 3.5 years. Totally convinced the scientists there that they had psychic powers, and they would report to me after each session as to what they had done. And I said to the kids, if they ever ask you, was that a trick or are you doing tricks, you must immediately say, yes, these are tricks, and we were sent here by James Randi to test your ability to detect us. They were never asked.
They asked me if I could affect a video camera. So what I did was I simply thought about it for a few seconds and said, I can give it a try. So I put my hand up to my head, and I concentrated on the camera. And sure enough, 2 flashes appeared on the film. All I had simply done was, when I brought my head on in, I'd taken my left hand, brought it up around, and I turned the camera on and off very quickly. Of course, I hadn't noticed this because they were actually watching in the monitors, which were sitting off to the side.
Watch carefully at times.
But the scientists chose a far-out explanation rather than the most obvious one.
Steve's method is one of telling his subconscious mind what it is he'd like to have happen, then ridding his conscious mind of thoughts so that his subconscious mind can perform the task. The phenomenon here resemble what happens when the power to a video camera is briefly cut.
They want to believe so bad that they let you get away with everything. They basically want to document it and show it to the rest of the world. What they're trying to do is show their own beliefs to the rest of the world, as opposed to really proving it to the world.
In the 1980s, the American media began to take an interest in James Heydrich, a young man of remarkable physical prowess who also claimed to have psychic powers. Heydrich could apparently make a pencil spin without touching it, make a dollar bill turn on a pin under an upturned fish tank, or riffle the pages of a telephone directory. Danny Coram, a professional magician turned investigative journalist, was suspicious. He persuaded Heydrich to take part in a TV documentary.
He fooled millions of people here in this country. And then scientists. Scientists took him into the University of Utah.
My Lord, to go. Wow, wow. I done told you. Wow, wow. Early in the morning. Wow, wow. Don't you hear them? Wow, wow. Whistle blowing. Wow, 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 wow. My mother's on that train, bound for glory. My mother's on that train, bound for glory. I know my mother's on that train, bound for glory. Now don't you done told you, hear them great God Almighty whistle early in the morning, blowing, oh Lord of mercy, wow, 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 wow. Change, 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 my father's on that train. I know my father's on that train. Have mercy, Lord, bound for child. I know my father's on that train. That train, I mean, bound for glory. Now, don't you? I done told you, hear them, great God Almighty, whistle early in the morning, blowing, oh Lord of mercy, wow, 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 wow. Change, 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 yes, we're gonna ride that train. Bound for glory. We're gonna ride that train. Have mercy, Lord. Bound for glory. Yes, we're gonna ride that train. That train, I mean, bound for glory. Now, don't you? I done told you. Wow, wow, ticket. Wow, wow. New Orleans.
Heydrich had built up a cult-like following in Salt Lake City, with a peculiar mix of martial arts and the paranormal. He would astonish his young students by seeming to make heavy punch bags in his gym swing without touching them.
It only worked at a certain time of day. See, it was an old building, had kind of a corrugated metal roof. Okay, so about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, roof would start to heat up. But when it would heat up, it would expand and shift. And then he says, I want you to start imagining that the building's starting to crack, to rotate. And you'd hear these popping sounds. And then because the roof is, expanding, it would cause the gym bags, which were suspended from the ceiling, to start to sway. And it was very impressive.
One by one, Coram began to work out how Heydrich's feats were done. Most of them depended on an extraordinary ability to exhale a strong stream of breath without it showing on his face or lips. It was strong enough even to pass through any tiny gaps between the fish tank and the table. He had developed the page-turning effect while serving a prison sentence, using the Bible to impress fellow inmates.
And he would tell prisoners, if you will pray with me, the Holy Spirit will cause the pages of the Bible to turn. This is blasphemous. And he would actually blow on the pages. And a lot of times he'd let the inmate think that they were causing, the pages to turn.
Heydrich became confused when he saw Coram replicating his own psychic phenomena, and even thought that Coram might have genuine powers.
The toughest part, though, was exposing the tricks without causing him to become hostile, because he was a very dangerous individual.
Realizing that he had been found out, Heydrich agreed to make a full confession on camera.
I'm not going like that, because that can be seen. I am taking air from inside and causing it to come out in a way to where nothing here shows. My whole idea behind this in the first place was to see how dumb America was, how dumb the world is.
In our age, it's arguable that one man has had more influence on the public's belief in psychic powers than any other. Uri Geller seemed to bring miracles into the television studio and became the first psychic superstar. He told us he could bend metal with the power of his mind, and most of us believed him. The psychic superstar of the 70s, Uri Geller, is back. He's an ideal subject for Channel 5's Fame and Fortune, the Hello magazine of television. His claim to be able to bend spoons with the power of his mind is still his trademark, and has helped to make him a very wealthy man.
This is not an illusion. I mean, it is real. The metal is giving away. I feel it cracking. Melt. 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 See, it's very, very soft now. It's almost like plastic. Look. Unfortunately, this is a trademark that stuck to me. And every time a paper writes something about me, they always say, Uri Geller, the spoon bender.
If a man could do this, then no engineering structure made from metal was safe.
He shows quite good psychic perceptual ability. Not the best we've ever seen, but quite good.
As far as I'm aware, from my observation, Geller has no psychic ability whatsoever. However, he's a very clever, well-practiced magician.
His big break came in 1973.
Ladies and gentlemen, Uri Geller.
The 26-year-old Israeli, who David Dimbleby told us had baffled American scientists, astonished the nation. He broke a fork.
Look, it's like it's becoming like plastic. And it's breaking. It's breaking. There's a crack. You can look. It's very.
On the same show, Geller duplicated a drawing which had been sealed in an envelope.
Bought me a washboard and a tub. I put it straight on the board, start to rub. I started rubbing on the darn old thing. Now she said, Papa, don't you rub so rough. When you hear me holler, then that's enough. So I start rubbing, rubbing on the darn old thing. Then I start rubbing it with care. While she sat down in a chair, I kept rubbing, rubbing on the darn old thing. She said, I sure likes the way you rub. You got the best washboard bin in my tub. I start rubbing, rubbing on the darn old thing. I kept rubbing, the clock struck 6. She said, you got time to get your kicks. I started rubbing, rubbing on the darn old thing. I said, Mama, just keep still. That stroke didn't get it, but this one will. I started rubbing, rubbing on the darn old thing. I got tired, start to sweat. She said, don't quit, you ain't started yet. I started rubbing, rubbing on the darn old thing. She held up her dress and started to grin. I said, baby, let's do it again. Kept on rubbing, rubbing on the darn old thing.
Don't you threaten me, Connie. If it hadn't been for you, my son would be alive today.
Your son had a talent for smashing up racing cars. I didn't tell him to take that flip at Le Mans.
Anne started a number of apparently broken watches.
Okay, no, I tried my best. Oh, wait, it's moving. It's moving. No, it is. It's working.
He convinced experts and audience alike that supernatural powers were at work. It was a seminal performance, establishing a psychic repertoire that has changed little over the years, and it released a tidal wave of belief in the paranormal. The editor of the Daily Mirror in the 70s, Mike Malloy, remembers Geller's press value.
Geller was a big story, a big international story, and very acute businessman. One of the things he offered to do was stop Big Ben. He said that, I can stop Big Ben for you, but I want £1 million to do this, and an aircraft waiting to fly me out of the country.
But the image Mike Malloy remembers most vividly is of Geller bending a spoon in his office.
It just bent away, just like a finger bending. It was quite extraordinary. And everyone kind of looked and went, ooh, you know, because it was quite spooky.
Malloy was convinced by Geller's powers and dined out on this story until
open verdict. I mean, what I saw Uri Geller do was remarkable, and I had no reason to doubt it, but perhaps he's just a brilliant conjurer after all.
You can all do this yourself. You can all do this yourself. It's an optical illusion. You see, you get the spoon like this, and you just grip the end of it like this, and you do that, and you give the impression of bending the spoon. You can do it yourself. Just look, just like you're bending the spoon.
Conjurers can duplicate all of the Geller repertoire. What they fail miserably to do, claims Geller, is demonstrate these feats under laboratory conditions. But can he? Uri Geller's interactive Psychic City, his chic website on the internet, presents a collection of reports which seem to give scientific credence to his psychic abilities. But do they? One report is by the mathematician John Taylor, who met Geller on the Dimbleby talk-in, and was clearly caught up in the excitement of the moment.
I believe this process. I believe that you actually broke the fork here and now.
Yes.
Let's find out, first of all, what caused this.
Geller visited Taylor at King's College and impressed him greatly. But later, Taylor established proper experimental controls and became far more sceptical.
2 years after the Dimbleby appearance, Geller came into my lab. He had an informal look round. Didn't try anything, he just looked round. And then he came back some weeks later for about an hour and a half, and he tried to bend the pieces of metal that we had set up. Nothing happened. Nothing at all. And at that point, we said, could you come back later? He never reappeared. And he's never reappeared since. I found nobody who could demonstrate any psychic powers under the conditions that I would say were 100%.
Many of the reports on Geller's website are not formal scientific tests. In fact, only one published paper was presented for peer review. It was from the Stanford Research Institute, the SRI, and although its referees expressed strong doubts, the prestigious journal Nature printed it anyway, to show how the fringe science of parapsychology was being taken seriously at such a reputable institute. Geller often refers to being tested at the SRI. His confidence and stridency here with Andrew Neil give the impression that the tests were a success.
So I've been validated. That's how I feel. Nature magazine, the most prestigious magazine in the world, ran a 15-page paper about me.
But the editorial in Nature warned that details of the SRI experiments were disconcertingly vague. The authors of the Nature report were Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff. And their principal experiments on metal bending were far from successful.
You ask me why I'm grieving, I'll tell you why I'm grieving. I'm grieving for the gal that done me wrong. So gather round and listen, and let's just see a lesson. You shouldn't never leave your gal too long. 'Cause I left her standing there with a doodad in her hair, but I guess she didn't care so much for me. 'Cause I heard that she was wet, and I wish that I was dead, but the chances are I'll live till 93. If you think this song is silly, go right ahead and laugh, but the heart in this hillbilly is busted right in half. 'Cause I left her standing there with a doodad in her hair, but I guess she didn't care so much for me. The folks all tried to show me just why this gal would throw me if I should go and leave her by herself. But I just said, you're crazy, this gal of mine's a daisy, but now she's gone and put me on the shelf. Oh, left her standing there with a doodad in her hair. I thought when I come back she'd be my bride, but when I got out of sight, oh, she didn't live the night till someone else was sitting by her side. When she said goodbye, she whispered, you know I love you best, and I'll bet $2 she whispered the same to all the rest. 'Cause I left her standing there with a doodad in her hair, but I guess she didn't care so much for me.
5 weeks of working with him in the laboratory, we were unsuccessful in demonstrating or eliciting anything that looked like scientific evidence for metal bending under laboratory conditions.
Ray Hyman is a psychologist from the University of Oregon and an accomplished magician. He was asked by the US Defense Department to go to the SRI and observe Geller for a day.
I saw what I thought was just a rather crude trickster. In terms of technique, in terms of psychology, very superb. He could bend minds better than he could bend metal.
George Lawrence was sent to the SRI by the Advanced Research Projects Agency in Washington, who felt they could not afford to dismiss the possibility of a psychic offensive in the Cold War.
I was invited to SRI to see Uri Geller, to witness a demonstration. And in fact, Uri Geller bent my nail clipper.
Ray Hyman remembers that Geller asked George to hold the clipper whilst he tried to bend it.
He said, hold it in your hand, like that. And Geller then stood over George and went,
He couldn't bend it while it sat in the palm of my hand, and he stared at it and made his face get red. However, he said if he took it in his hand and communicated with it, that perhaps it would respond better to his efforts. So he did that, put it back in my hand, folded my hand over it, and said, let me try again. And when I unfolded my hand, sure enough, there was a slight curvature in the file part. That somehow didn't convince me that we ought to count on this as a way to conduct warfare. No.
Ray Hyman pointed out that the nail clipper had been in Uri's possession for some time, when he would have had the opportunity to bend it. Is it more likely that Uri's hands bent the clipper, or the power of his mind? Russell Targ, co-author of the Nature Report, still stands by its claims that Geller succeeded in duplicating drawings made at random in one room, whilst Geller was in another. Critics charged that the tests were chaotic. Targ says it was controlled chaos.
We could control the amount of chaos in the laboratory because it was our laboratory. When Geller is on stage, the observer has no control at all of what goes on. So we feel that there's not a lot of room for trickery in these really quite simple experiments.
Psychologist David Marks published a detailed critique of the SRI report in The Psychology of the Psychic, and thinks Targ's confidence in the reliability of the SRI drawing tests is ill-founded.
They were appallingly controlled. Geller was left entirely unobserved inside this room. These days, or even in those days, any competent experimenter would have put a video camera on Geller and observed him at every second of the experiment, and would have provided no loopholes. The Nature paper, I'm afraid, provides no evidence of Geller's claimed psychic powers whatsoever.
Geller may have been tested by scientists, but no one has managed to replicate the work carried out at the SRI, a fundamental principle in establishing scientific proof.
The one thing we do know from all the experiments over the years in parapsychology is that if there is a phenomenon there, it is weak, variable, and very difficult to pin down. Whereas the super psychics are claiming that they have a power that is more or less under their control and extremely powerful. And that just has never been shown in the laboratory at all.
The scientists may have been unable to authenticate Geller's most famous talent, psychic spoon-bending. Conjurers, however, quickly spotted a rich source of new material for their box of tricks. But how did they manage to bend spoons without psychic powers? Self-confessed illusionist Ian Rowland explains just one of the many ways it can be done.
Now this is by any standards a very unusual way to hold a spoon, but I condition people to see that this is how I hold it.
Far away on the hill to a sunny mountainside, many years ago we parted, my little Ruth and I, from the sunny mountainside. She clung to me and trembled when I told her we must part. She says, don't go, my darling, it almost breaks my heart to think of you so far apart. Carry me back to old Virginia, back to my back to old Virginia, back to my old mountain home. Well, Fold my arms around her, leaned her head up on my breast. I told her I would wed her when I came back from the west at my old Plains Mountain home. In my hand I hold a picture of the old home far away. In the other one, my sweetheart, I'm thinking of today on the sunny mountainside. Carry me back to old Virginia, back to my Plains Mountain home. Carry me back to old Virginia, back to my old mountain home. Well, my mother's old and feeble, my father's getting gray. I'm going back to Virginia, and I expect to stay at my old Plains Mountain home. Carry me back to old Virginia, back to my Plains Mountain home. Carry me back to old Virginia, back to my old mountain home. Well,
a book about a nightmare. Page after page, the same nightmare. About a murder.
Murder? Come on, Connie.
You want your rent, landlord? Well, you're gonna get it.
Look, honey, forget about the rent.
You'll get it with a bonus. Now scram.
We were gonna have a drink together.
I'm about to have a previous engagement.
Connie, don't get carried away with this thing. I beg you.
That's the difference between us, Ray. You beg, and I take.
I will then create some misdirection just for a split second, and what I will do is actually put a bend into the spoon. It doesn't take more than a fraction of a second to actually do that. And as soon as I've done that, I carry on back to this position. Now, people have already seen me holding the spoon like this, so they're not suspicious. And at this stage, we're going to the next phase of the trick, which is what we call the pivot move, or the optical bend. You concentrate everybody's attention on this end, by the way you look, the way you hold the spoon, and you actually pivot it at this central point, and that gives an optical illusion as if it's bending further. So it looks a bit like this. It's bending more, it's going higher, it's going higher, it's going higher. Because I think you can do this.
On a chat show which boasted one of Oprah Winfrey's early appearances, Geller demonstrated a spoon bend, which may or may not have been done with supernatural forces in the face of all known physical laws. It does, however, look awfully like the conjuring trick Ian Rowland sometimes uses.
And I say, if you look at that spoon, it will carry on bending.
See? And it still is bending slowly upwards.
9 times out of 10, people say, yeah, I can see it's actually bending a little bit more still.
It's still bending
it still is bending very slowly upwards.
Look.
Some of them say they do it by genuine psychic powers, and maybe they do. When I do it, it's a trick. You pay your money, you take your choice. But it looks the same.
But if it's not psychic, why hasn't anyone actually seen Geller bend a spoon with his hands? Well, in fact, a number of people say they have. One of them is Bob Cootie, who visited Geller at his home when he was researching a radio series and a book on the paranormal.
He took the spoon and then said, well, I need to be near something metal. And he stepped to one side. And as he stepped over, he sort of pushed in and down. And then he turned the spoon and hid the bend behind his hand, and then began to rub the spoon and made it appear that it was then bending. And I was very startled and in a way shocked, and I was thinking, what? I mean, this was his house in front of his family, and you don't go into another man's house and call him a liar in front of his own wife and children.
Yes. Will you bend a spoon? Yes, I'm just waiting for him to bring a teaspoon.
Excuse me.
Geller featured on the Gotcha segment of Noel Edmonds' house party, but somehow discovered the hidden cameras. This was hailed as proof of his psychic powers. But before he rumbled Noel's plot, he performed some feats in a way that critics think is revealing.
Look, you see, it's beginning.
Oh my God! Quite unbelievable.
See, it's bending upwards.
At a restaurant table, Geller bent a spoon a little, and then the other diners started to take an interest.
I didn't come to do a show here, but I'm doing it with my mind.
It clearly seems to me as though he bent the spoon as he was standing up.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Then he walked over to one of the other diners and handed the spoon to her. And it's clear that the spoon is bent a lot more when it leaves his hand than when it went into his hands. And I wonder why he needed, with this light object like a spoon, to put it over and hold it in both hands, and why this suspicious move was made.
Despite his reputation as a spoon bender, Geller is just as likely to make a piece of cutlery break, like this. It's a different effect, but is it caused by supernatural means? An easier way to create this effect would be to weaken the spoon beforehand by bending it back and forth to the point at which it's about to fracture. When the time comes, it would need only a little more manipulation to make it break. Is there any metallurgical difference between a spoon broken by repeated bending and this one allegedly broken psychically by Geller?
The psychokinetic energy melts the molecular structure of the metal and breaks it.
I managed to get hold of the spoon that Geller had broken, the fracture surface of this, and I had this examined in a scanning electron microscope. And a fatigue fracture in a metal is very, very characteristic. And so when we looked at the spoons that Geller had broken, we could see these fatigue striations in the fracture surface. And that was a clear indication that he'd broken the spoon by having a sort of bending operation like that on it. He perhaps did that sort of bending off camera.
Now look here, you children. Mama's going to work now, and I don't want no swinging in here while I'm gone.
Aye, Mama, we ain't gonna swing while you gone, Mama.
And another thing, if old Dipper Lip comes over here with his big bass fiddle, tell him Mama don't allow no swinging in here.
All right, we'll tell him, Mama.
And another thing, you know what Brother Satchel said when he come past the other PM? He said you boys was in there swinging. You should have been down at the meeting.
Well, we going down to meeting this evening, Mama.
All right, I'm going to work now, boys. Be good. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Mama. I'm sure glad she's gone, ain't you, man? Me too, man. I get tired of playing way down up on the Shanghai River all the time. Say, who is that coming in the gate there? That looks like old Dipper Lip with his big bass fiddle. Come in.
Well, what do you say,
Well,
you
that's what
kid?
it is, that Dipper Lip.
How come y'all ain't swinging?
Well, Mama told us not to swing.
What? Well, let me vamp you down.
Grab us down then. Mama don't like no guitar playing here. No, Mama don't like no guitar playing here. I don't care what Mama don't like, I'm gonna play my guitar anyhow. Mama don't like no guitar playing in here. Play it. Mama don't like no bass slapping in here. No, Mama don't like no bass slapping in here.
Well, I don't care if Mama don't allow, slap my bass anyhow.
Mama don't like no bass slapping in here. Be loud, Satchel. Slap that bass hard. Oh, you howl, you. Slap it down. Yeah. Mama don't like no saddles in here. Whoa, Mama don't like no saddles in here. Well, I don't care what Mama don't like, no saddles in here. Mama don't like no saddles in here. Oh, scatty beat, back bass, scatty, hold back beat, bass. La la da 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 da. Do the slap, know your bell. Boogie, boogie, stop it down. Oh, baby, brrr. Yeah. Mama don't like no fiddle swinging here. No, Mama don't like no fiddle swinging here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't like, I'll swing my fiddle, la la la. Mama don't like no fiddle swinging here. Swinging. Look at that man who I see coming in the gate there. Oh, it looks like Mama coming. Come on, let's play one more piece before she gets in here. All right. Yeah. Mama don't like no ring and twist in here. Mama don't like no ring and twist in here. We don't care what Mama don't like no ring and twist anyhow. Mama don't like no ring and twist in here. Da 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 da.
It's going, it's gone. There's nothing magical about that. That's straightforward metallurgy. Low cycle, high strain fatigue.
Before Geller, no psychic had bent a spoon. But the trick of being able to duplicate a hidden drawing has been known to conjurers for years, and there are dozens of methods described in books and journals available to the magic trade. There are trick pads, fake envelopes, you can even buy a hidden transmitter. Ian Rowland's audience here do not know how this duplication is done. But not knowing how something is done does not automatically mean that it is paranormal.
What is it? A vase of flowers.
Oh my
God! No.
There are umpteen ways of going about it, and if you explained it all in detail, it would take more than time than you got in this program. It can be done by trickery, and some people say they can do it by genuine psychic powers. If they're using genuine psychic powers, they are doing it the hard way.
This drawing was done this afternoon. It was done behind a wall in one of the dressing rooms here, and it was then sealed up like this.
Very well sealed up too.
Geller's drawing duplications using telepathy on television look identical with the techniques used by conjurers. This in itself does not mean that he is using those same techniques, but neither does it tell us that he is doing anything different. He asks us to believe he is psychic simply because he says so. Conjurer James Randi has the reputation of being Geller's most persistent critic.
When you finish your drawing, photograph it with your mind.
He's taken a close look at Geller's performance of a drawing duplication filmed surreptitiously for Noel Edmonds' house party. Randi thinks he sees here something very similar to what conjurers call the peak.
I'm not looking. Go ahead and draw.
He turns away like this and then immediately turns back and is facing her.
I'm not looking. Go ahead and draw. But keep it very simple.
Now I'm looking straight at you and I can see you clearly through the crack of my fingers.
Tell me when you finished it.
And now I'm looking straight at the lens of the camera, and I'm seeing the lens of the camera very plainly.
Because I really got the image very, very strongly. Is it something like a little house?
Oh, I can't believe it.
Am I right? May I see it?
I can't believe it.
Yeah, there, exactly.
Uri Geller caught the world's attention not only with the miracles he performs close up, before your very eyes, but also with the so-called Geller effect, his apparent ability to influence objects such as watches at a distance, even in the homes of a TV audience. David Marks has a test in which he asks his non-psychic students to phone people at random and see whether they have an old, seemingly broken watch.
We will telephone them, ask them to do exactly the same thing that Geller does. We find that we get the same results, that in a certain percentage of cases, watches which have not worked for perhaps years will begin to tick again, and it's the act of holding these things in your hand and warming them up a bit that gets them ticking again.
Ian Rowland discovered that these broadcast effects work even for the non-psychic. On a live TV program, he pretended to psychically wipe floppy disks in viewers' homes across the airwaves.
And sure enough, 3 or 4 people phoned in to say that they had saved some data on the disk, they had checked it now, ever since I did my psychic zapping, and the disk was now blank, you know, a psychic miracle. There's no trick, there's no method, but if you go on a live television program watched by the sorts of people who believe in psychic abilities and you tell them this is going to happen, people will phone in and say it's happened.
Would you welcome, please, Uri Geller?
Television is not a laboratory, and studios are designed for entertainment, not scientific investigation. When Uri Geller appeared on The Carson Show and was trying to divine which of these film cans had water in it, he was unaware that the show's producer had consulted magician James Randi.
Et quand il est pas marié, il a pas le temps de vous le créer. Les musiciens qu'après m'attendent, on est des emplois chinois. Mariez-vous dans pas d'acteur, la musette est trop jolie. Et les petites filles sont si mignonnes, et les femmes sont mortifiantes. La vie pour moi, c'est de voir aujourd'hui. dans les chagrins. Moi, j'en ai ça me fait de la peine, c'est de me voir aujourd'hui.
Trying to avoid me, are you, Connie?
I'm your tenant, landlord, not your chattel.
So I'm being put in my place again.
Connie pays for what Connie gets.
I'm sorry.
You worried about your rent, landlord?
Well, it's been quite a long time. I don't like to mention it, Connie.
Why don't you stop up later for a drink?
I'm having a hard time with you.
Look, I don't mean to be, Yuri. I really don't.
Just keep looking. Okay, let me rest a little, all right?
All right.
The prop cabinet was kept closed and locked with a padlock, and Geller was not allowed to handle these things, which may, in my professional estimation, have some influence, may have had some influence somewhere along the line on whether or not the performance was a success. As it was a dead loss for Mr. Keller.
Uri was telling me you don't feel, what, strong tonight?
I don't feel strong. It's not all tonight. Right now I'm feeling being pressed, and then I can't...
Well, I'm not trying to press you, I really not.
No, you're only telling me, well, will you try that or that or that?
Well, I thought that was the idea of no, I'm not trying to put you down.
Once again, if you'll allow me to plug this myself, and the reason
After what seemed to be a quiet period in the 1980s, Geller has effected a comeback. These days, he's trying to make money from products which are supposed to have benefited from his powers.
There's a crystal in here, which is this one. I've touched every crystal. I've touched
9 days.
11
days.
50,000 crystals were held in my hand.
Geller's slickly designed website advertises not only Uri Bear, psychically charged of course, but something called the Geller Edge. Uri wants to help your business. An apparent success story involves Geller dowsing for diamonds in the Solomon Islands for the Australian mining company Xanax. Its former chairman is quoted as gushing recently,
"I will never drill an oil well without asking Uri Geller's advice first."
So just how did Geller's unique powers help Xanax? John Shepard's company had a major shareholding in Xanax in the 1980s, when he heard that they had hired Geller apparently for a fee of $250,000 US.
Apart from laughing, I was horrified. I certainly couldn't see how he could fly over islands and locate gold deposits. And the results from the time he spent there were all negative. And in fact, history now shows that it was negative. By seeing on the internet his page, and it's a prominent part of his promotion about the Solomon Islands experience. And clearly it was a failure. And I find it staggering that Geller can be using the Solomon Island experience as a success story. It was certainly a psychic disaster.
If these paranormal phenomena were real, and if somebody could genuinely demonstrate thought transference, psychokinesis, that you could move objects by the power of thought, that would be bringing to light an entire new field of physics. And you get a Nobel Prize for that. So what are these people doing, fooling around, doing stupid entertainment, doing television programs, when they could be achieving the acclaim of scientists the world over? The reason, of course, is that they're not exploiting and using new physical forces. They're doing conjuring tricks.
Programs like Beyond Belief seem to feed an increasing appetite for all things paranormal as we approach the third millennium. We trusted presenter Sir David Frost to pin down Richard Nixon in his famous interviews with Tricky Dicky. Should Beyond Belief's 12 million viewers expect similar rigour in the investigation it boasts?
Thank you very much. Hello, good evening, and welcome to Beyond Belief, the first ever live television investigation into the world of the paranormal.
Endless numbers of programs are presented every week all around the world, in every culture and every language, that are pro-paranormal. And one of the reasons for that is producers and editors recognize an attractive story that they would like to be true, because they recognize that the public would like it to be true as well.
I'm actually communicating now with millions of people.
But are the phenomena presented on these programs really beyond belief? They are often much less surprising if you don't assume a paranormal explanation.
If by any chance you would make a mistake to try to come in and take any one of us, we will not let you. You will die. You will have to take anybody over all of our dead bodies. Love's the only weapon. Shit! Bullshit! Martin Luther King died with love. Kennedy died talking about something he couldn't even understand, some kind of generalized love, and he never even backed it up. He shut down. Bullshit! Love is the only weapon with which I got to fight. I got a hell of a lot of weapons to fight. I got my claws, I got compasses, I got guns, I got dynamite, I got a hell of a lot to fight. I'll fight, I'll fight, I will fight, I will fight, I will fight, I will fight. Let them hear it in the night. the night roar with it. They're out there. They're out there. They're listening. Let the night roar with it. Let the night roar, because they can hear us. They know we mean it. We'll kill them if they come.
These symbols would you pick as Uri Geller tries to broadcast the one he's thinking of to the audience at home?
Really strongly passing it to you one more time.
Well, this is a tense moment now for me, and for
47% of people who called chose the star symbol.
Oh. Hey!
Elation and astonishment was displayed all around. We had witnessed live evidence of telepathy. Or had we?
That's
wait, I have to say...
A much more banal explanation is also much more likely, that the effect relied on a phenomenon which has been known to psychologists and indeed conjurers for many years.
Anyway, that is amazing. Thank you, Yuri.
We've known from as long ago as 1939, a psychologist called Frederick Lund looked at which of the 5 symbols on the Xenopack were the most commonly chosen, and it's a star. Another effect that he picked up on was the fact that if you have an array of symbols, people tend not to pick the ones at the end. They tend not to pick the first one or the last one. Putting these two factors together, it was very fortunate for Yuri, I think, that he picked the star.
Boris is going to place this hand over an article of their clothing.
On Beyond Belief, we were assured that Russian so-called psychic Boris Tulchinsky could sense colours clairvoyantly.
With orange.
Is this performance really paranormal? Professional illusionists through the ages have done much more impressive things whilst blindfolded.
Put the blindfold on, like so. And now, I'm going to do something that you should never try. Don't try this at home. But many of you read the impression that you're actually driving behind this guy.
There are various ways of performing feats whilst apparently blindfolded. Magicians keep the details to themselves, but most of them depend on a simple trick: being able to see.
JT is apparently an amazingly telepathic dog.
JT the dog's telepathic talent was shown on the paranormal world of Paul McKenna in what was billed as a genuine experiment. JT could apparently tell when his owner decided to return home. To prove it, 2 cameras had filmed simultaneously, one on JT's owner Pam and one on the psychic dog.
Incredibly, just 8 seconds after Pam decides to start the 6-mile journey home, JT moves to the window to wait for her.
But psychologist Richard Wiseman, one of the guests on the show, found himself wondering whether the story served up to the viewers was as remarkable as it seemed. So he set up his own experiment.
We filmed him continuously over a 3-hour period, and at one point we had the owner randomly think about returning home from the remote location. And yes, indeed, JT was at the window at that point. What our videotape showed, though, was that JT was visiting the window about once every 10 minutes. And so under those conditions, it's not surprising he was there when his owner was thinking of returning home.
There we go. Hello.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Okay, this is perfect. She give me something. What is this?
Money.
Money. All right.
If the allegedly telepathic abilities Ronnie and Oren demonstrated on Beyond Belief are genuine, then they have succeeded where generations of parapsychologists have failed. But would anyone be so amazed if, instead, they were just a classic stage mind-reading act?
Okay, what is this in English?
Throughout the history of psychical research, there have been pairs of people who say they can communicate via telepathy. And the problem with testing those is that there is a large literature written by magicians on ways of faking that. And most of that has to do with secret codes between the two people. And the codes can be to do with the words that people use, their body language, even the time between emitting any sort of signal, like a cough.
Now that we have won the fight, all together we will write the last page of Mein Kampf. We will write it, yes indeed, so the whole wide world can read the last page of Mein Kampf. The book is full of hooey, the way it's written now. The plans of Schicklgruber, we changed them all and how. Now that we have won the fight, all together we will write the last page of Mein Kampf. Conquered nations now are free, they'll be happy when they see the last page of Mein Kampf. We'll restore each boundary line, allied nations will design the last page of Mein Kampf. And there'll be no timetable to conquer any land, but there will be 4 freedoms which will forever stand. Slavery and brutal might will be ended when we write the last page of Mein Kampf. Goebbels, Guarantee, all will pass out when they view the last page of Mein Kampf. They will find it's not a joke, and that Adolf never wrote the last page of Mein Kampf. There'll be no Nazis howling, we'll put them in their place, and there'll be no more raving about a master race. Adolf and his gang will send on to Hades when we end the last page of Mein Kampf.
Well, there's more than one way to skin a mink.
Why does Ronnie suddenly say go here?
Cigarettes. Go.
Okay, now.
Why does he ignore the presenter's instruction to ask what one man has in his pocket?
This chap, what he's got in his
Orange.
Yeah.
This is terrific. So, well, one second.
Okay.
Kid, what's his name?
The audience could be invited to suggest controls. Like somebody in the audience could put his hand up and say, make the father not shout out anything to the son. Make the father stay completely silent. Now that in itself might be enough to completely spoil the trick. And that would be, I think, good entertainment. Even if it wasn't good entertainment, I think it should be done. The television producers will sometimes say, oh, you couldn't do that. We'd just lose all the viewers. We'd lose all the ratings. I'm afraid that's just too bad. They should.
Get your free 10 minutes now from Psychic Readers Network. Get the free time you need.
Now, I heard you saying before you thought you had a fantastic reading.
He gave me a lot of insight on career opportunities in the future.
The psychics we are most likely to encounter today tell us not what's in someone's pocket, but what we can expect in our lives.
Actually told me some good things about it.
This kind of psychic hotline promotion is common on television in America. People are invited to phone in for personalized psychic readings.
It was magical, though, because I didn't believe...
Such readings are likely to use a technique called cold reading, which makes you feel that generalized statements relate specifically to your life.
Well, I gotta tell them they should really try it before they die.
But isn't all this just harmless fun, even therapeutic? Mark Paul's experience suggests otherwise. He's a magician who read about cold reading techniques in conjuring literature and booked himself a stall at a psychic fair.
Someone can sit down and I can assess their character. I can look at them. I can look at the way they sit. I can look at the way they hold their hands. I can look at the way that they react to certain questions. And by reading the information that they're giving back to me, I can give them an accurate character reading about themselves. And sometimes the accuracy is quite amazing.
Anyone can read a manual on cold reading and amaze complete strangers.
You appear to be a highly emotional type of person. At one moment you're at the height of elation and the next deep in despair. As a consequence, you do really love life.
As Mark Paul's day at the psychic fair progressed, he realized that he was getting into deeper and deeper water.
They want details, they want to hear information about themselves. And it's easy to give that information, but when it comes down to specifics like, you know, what's my baby going to be like, is it going to be healthy, so on, the morality of the whole thing just hit me really hard. I mean, I went in a sinner and came away a saint. I just couldn't do it.
Some may find solace in spurious psychic readings and lose only their money. But so-called psychic surgeons can seriously damage your health. Richard Wiseman went to investigate Rubens de Faria, visiting from Brazil, who had made a makeshift operating theatre in a Mayfair public library.
I'll take your word for it.
He was claiming that whatever your illness, he could make a small but real cut into your stomach and release the bad spirits. He was making real incisions, not deep incisions, but real ones. There was blood over the instruments, blood over his hands. He was moving from one patient to the next without washing his hands, sterilizing the instruments.
We are thinking in a medieval fashion now. We've gone back to superstition and mythology, and we're embracing it all. If in this country we can have the Tinkerbell White House, as I refer to it, where Ronald Reagan is actually depending upon the wisdom of an astrologer in San Francisco in order to direct his personal life and affairs of state, I seriously think that this is a bad situation in which we find ourselves.
If, for example, somebody goes to a psychic and they feel better afterwards, or if, as we know, people who believe in life after death are in some ways happier and better adjusted than people who don't, isn't it then wrong for scientists to come along and say, well, you know, science says death's the end and life's meaningless? Well, I think not, honestly. In the end, I think I would always rather go for truth as far as we can find it in science and hope that we can learn to cope with it.
True science is wonderful, true science is deeply mysterious, but we're working on explaining it. There could be evidence which one day will show that something that we would now think of as magical or paranormal is true, but there's no reason at all to think that it will be those particular, rather poverty-stricken ideas that happen to be floating around at the moment and called the paranormal.
James Randi's Educational Foundation is offering a prize of $1.1 million to anyone who can prove a genuine psychic phenomenon under controlled conditions.
The front door of this foundation is just around the corner here, and we can hear if anyone knocks on the door or rings the bell. Would you not think, with all of the psychic powers that are being practiced every day by all of these psychics all around the world, and particularly here in the United States of America, that there wouldn't be a lineup outside that door of people trying to win the $1.1 million? We don't get anyone applying for it.
And there you have it, guys, the secrets of the psychics. Out of all that talent and ingenuity, the one performer to rule them all ends up being Uri Geller, the man who could bend spoons. If that's all it takes to own an island, let me at it. Bend, bend, bend. Whoops. I suppose you should use a metal spoon, but then again, if I could rub a spoon until it turned to goop, wouldn't it be a more impressive stunt? Someone should try. Before you go, you heard from Connie this week. She appeared this time in an old 1960 series entitled Thriller, hosted by Boris Karloff. Connie was played by, of course, Constance Ford, and later appeared in the episode of Twilight Zone called Uncle Simon. She plays Barbara Polk, the caretaker for Uncle Simon's robot after he died. Of course, that robot was played by Robbie the Robot, and Connie Ford was almost as Connie-like as she was in the episode Worse Than Murder. There's more than one way to skin a mink.